I mean, yeah, you're clearly Jake.
Guys,
Who's
come
that
on up to
other
the
guy?
podium. Let's all. There's more people presenting than.
Why did everyone just come to the podium?
I don't wanna stand up there awkwardly for 20
Fun,
minutes.
good luck.
20 minutes.
What do you mean?
Except Norm.
Everybody speaks their piece and then can sit back down.
My piece is at the end.
No, everyone stands up all the time. Not getting
What else
judged.
did I say, Jake? I need to stand down there.
Yeah,
Yeah, thanks.
the height.
Perfect.
Like.
Yeah.
I'm still taller.
I know.
Yeah.
Austin and Tyler.
That's awesome. Austin should be coming
Yeah,
back.
Good
Austin should be.
That's
That's
right.
right.
Good thing Windows isn't like the first slide right
No,
Yeah.
it's fine. I got it. Yeah.
Alright, well, in the meantime, hi, if you want to be an officer, fill out the officer form.
It's in the
A little
Discord.
more enthusiasm.
Sorry. Hey, do you want to be an officer? That's all of my enthusiasm. Handle?
Sorry, what?
Doing the pitch.
Yeah, so if you guys want to be an officer next year, we're currently looking for new officers for the club next year. You can do a ton of different things. We're looking for president, vice president, some engagement and activity people. So if you guys are interested, there's a link. Has more description on it than I'm giving you, so feel free to check that out.
The
In the
link
Discord.
is in the Discord on the announcement for tonight's presentation and meeting. At the bottom of that announcement, there'll be a link saying like sign up for next year's officer meeting or like sign up or something.
Alright. How were the CCDC team? And we went to nationals last week.
Woo.
Thumbs up. Here's some pictures. This is our room. We had a bunch of systems to secure on a table. They were all laptops. There was, oh wait, there was a firewall that I got to configure. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. Make it sound boring.
Oh my god.
You want to give a general overview first?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Jackson.
So the main difference that we ran into between regionals and nationals was that regionals was entirely virtual, whereas nationals we had some physical boxes as well as some ESXi boxes that we had to maintain. As it says up there, we don't have our scorecard yet for it. We do know our placement, but we haven't gotten a like detailed breakdown of what we scored and stuff.
Yeah, so basically the scenario we were given, we were acting like we were a gaming company. So we had different websites, we had a blog. We also had a store where people could buy different gaming products that we had. We also hosted games so people could go to connect to our website, connect to our game servers and play the different games that we have. So that was the type of services that we were supposed to keep up, our different web servers or different games, different things like that.
Web servers were a big one.
And then we also had a physical phone that we'd have to answer for Orange Team, like customers who were calling us, and then we also had a barcode scanner. So if different products obviously had barcodes on them, so we were expected to keep that barcode scanner functional so that when customers wanted us to scan those barcodes, it would work.
This was Jackson's first year doing CCDC, by the way.
Just yeah, so they did give us a bit of information during the debriefing at nationals, so we were top 3 in red team points, which was really good. I think at regionals we were like 6th of 8 for red team,
very bad.
which was much worse. And then we were at the top of our service points. We did very, very well day 1 for services, and we did still very well for day 2. And yeah, I guess Linux side, do you want to talk about more automation?
No, I don't. So these are all our lessons learned, so we'll talk about them, but there's the summary. If you want to take away something, it's those 5 bullet points.
Windows. Ooh. The biggest thing for Windows is that we learned was firewalling. We were able to get firewalls up in probably 5-ish minutes, and we didn't really see any red team activity on Windows. When we talked to our red team afterwards, I think they couldn't run like the exploits because they couldn't get to like SMB or something like that. And then they just couldn't get on our boxes, which is awesome.
Yeah, so quick synopsis of Windows is we ran like 6 of the 8 laptops because like those were our client machines. Luckily for Linux, there were 2 like Linux laptops that they could use, but for the most part, we had to deal with clients. We had a domain controller. We had the point of sale system, which Tyler managed, but he's not here to talk about that sadly. and we had a DNS service, and then
We had an FTP server and only one of the like 5 web servers, I think.
Yeah, so after the fact, so minute zero, we set up firewalls as quick as we could. Red team after told us that we were actually one of the fastest teams to set up like firewalls and stop MS-1710, which is like the first exploit they tried throwing. But before they even figured out that was the exploit to use, we already had our firewalls up, so they couldn't get into our systems for like the entire competition. We were kind of lucky because one of our red teamers, so how it works is there's usually a blue team, and then there's one red team who's focused on that blue team the entire competition. For this, there were 2 Linux people and 1 Windows. Luckily, the strong suit, because they usually have like 1 good person and like 2 newbies to red teaming. And the newbie was, I believe, the one of our Windows people, which made the competition for the Windows side a lot easier than the Linux, since we didn't have to deal with like any red teamers.
You just gave up.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We're just too good. Give that a chance. On the point of sale system that Tyler had to manage, basically they had a database and that would have to connect to via SMB shares, running only SMB v1, meaning it was vulnerable to that MS-1710. And basically the way that Tyler got around that is he was able to firewall everything off, so only the boxes could communicate to each other, meaning that SMB wasn't allowed, wasn't accessible for Red Team at all. And once he did that and a few other like basic firewall things, that system was almost completely removed from Red Team's access.
Any questions about Windows?
I got no questions about Windows.
No one does.
Linux.
Actually, I do.
Yeah.
Was the Windows firewalling automated as part of your scripts beforehand, or was that?
No, it's all done on the spot. It's not
It's-
difficult.
It's hard to automate for it because we don't know what the specific services that are going to be scored are. So like the FTP box needed a different set of firewall rules than the HTTPS one. And like it's just very dependent on that. We could probably script out a GUI to like say I'm running an FTP one set of firewalls for that, but at that point it'll probably take more time because we'd have to go to the proxy server, download our script, run our script, and then select it. And at this point, it's just faster to select all, delete, and then add the rules.
Yeah, what we usually do is we just like, as fast as we can, open up the Windows Firewall Manager, and if it doesn't work, then we disable Samba and stuff, but if the firewall is like, we can configure it without any problems, what we'll do is immediately go in and delete every single inbound rule and start configuring from there. So that way, like, we might lose a check or 2 on Windows, but it'll be better in the long run because we stop Red Team from getting into like the easy stuff like the low-hanging fruit, Samba exploits.
And one thing to note is that at nationals, the systems aren't like already filled with malware. Generally, they're generally relatively base systems. Whereas for our mocks, we'll have scripts that we run to like kill Firewall and kill Defender and stuff like that. So in a way, it's a little bit friendlier of an environment.
Dwayne really likes having it where the red team has no information about it other than like you have a network, and then they have to like do all of that investigation stuff. So it doesn't come pre-configured with any malware or anything like that. It's just insecure.
Yeah, you're used to at our mocks where Red Team automatically like blew up the box beforehand, so that way they can just easily log in the entire competition. It's kind of hard to configure anything during our mocks. Red Team's a lot more aggressive. If you've noticed, like at nationals, they won't do anything the entire first day. Like they won't even like look at any boxes or distract you. As opposed to our mocks, like 2 minutes into the competition, they might start disabling your services. Can't do much about it.
Linux.
Linux was pretty good. So we had starting with 11 and then starting with 8 and then 9 of the critical services out of 12. So Windows really wasn't doing anything. Also the Windows red teamer, he just didn't want his payloads to be burned. So as soon as MS-17 didn't work, he just gave up and joined Linux. So there's that. Our automation was a really good idea. I think we put more time into it, would have been even better. Those are the tools we use. They're in our script repo if you want to see it.
We did script our firewalls.
We did, for the most part.
For the most part.
90%.
Except for cable servers.
Yeah, okay, buddy. So we did see a lot of red team activity. Windows didn't see any because there wasn't any. But for us, they replaced a lot of system D binaries. They kept hammering on one user, and you know when you type W, you see logged in SSH sessions. that wouldn't show up there because they were using no TTY, which is a feature for SSH. But yeah, red team, don't feel too bad for us because when they get in, like they nuked our web server once, you just revert and then shoot your scripts down a hole, and they can't really do anything, right? What are you gonna do? Our snapshots are clean, so it kind of sucks for them.
Backing up stuff was important. Was that?
Audience is out.
Yeah. Backing up stuff was a good idea, but we mostly just depended on the snapshots for that kind of stuff. Right out of the gates, my first priority was changing database passwords. Unfortunately, I don't know how to type and couldn't type the default password, so that was delayed a little bit.
Took him 30 minutes to log in the first time on the laptop.
Those are
There's
just
30 minutes in assistance from him.
those are just details.
I think it took him 2 hours to finally figure out what the password was. For that first 2 hours, Annie had to constantly log him in.
Yeah.
Put that on the record.
That's mostly true. But no, we got all the database password changes. Cody did all the web app password changes.
Except you
You
missed
wanna
one.
talk a little bit about those, the web
It
apps?
was broken.
It wasn't broken.
You guys can
Just
find
missed it.
Which one?
Okay,
Oh, I see.
anyways.
Yeah, let's take it. Yeah, most of them used the default creds that we were given. Just did my scans and went to every HTTP server to change the passwords.
Facts. And in the mail server for the environment, that was great. You did a good job, Cody. In the mail server, it was just destroyed. Like I changed passwords every way possible. I made the hash manually, copied in the file, and it still wouldn't take. So I just firewalled it off and killed SSH, and what are you gonna do? You have a mail server. So yeah, another note, RBAsh is very effective because it still works for support SSH services. So you can have support SSH without actually giving them any access. So put that in your playbook.
You want to talk about the econ site?
Oh, sure. So they started with a check down for us. So what we had to do was find in someone's home directory that had a SQL backup and a bash history. You just pump in the SQL backup to your MySQL, and then you're done.
Yeah, so basically, this was the first time they've ever had a service down from the beginning. And the idea was that we came in after an attack had happened, someone had gotten on, messed with everything. So yeah, Shay did a really good job of finding what needed to be done to bring it back up.
It took me longer than it should have, and then Annie was like, "Did you try? I don't know, looking for it?" And then I found it.
You didn't go deep enough.
I did.
Figure out how they got in.
Take you expense.
Is this the .1.3
This
thing?
is the gating, yes.
Oh.
It's in
Ah.
now.
Yeah, so towards the end of the competition, red team's allowed to do nasty stuff. They don't hold back towards the end. So what happened to us is about 45 minutes left in the comp. I would say all of our stuff on the cloud, quote, server just went red, and we had no idea what was going on. Turns out, we found out a little bit afterwards. They changed, what did they do? They changed the default gateway on all the cloud boxes
We
to.
figured it out during, but we couldn't really
I
change
thought
it.
they changed the IP address of all the cloud boxes to not one.
They
That way-
controlled 3 of them, and they changed those.
Yeah,
That way the default gateway didn't know where to send it to.
Yeah, so they changed the IP address of 3 of the systems to the default gateway, so the .1 in the network. So when stuff was trying to route and sent an ARP request for the default gateway, it would get a box inside the ESXi box and try to route internally, which means that routing just kind of looped and died. So the thing basically just went dark.
And because of that, all of our traffic that was trying to go to the ESXi box kind of got sinkholed.
Yeah, so you get 1/4 your traffic, because there's 1 real gateway and then 3 fake, usually. So it just seems like it's really slow on the outside, when, it's not.
yeah, and then I missed the other bullet point on this slide is, so for the game servers, we had 4 or 5 of those.
5 of those.
But we sort of just threw those to the sharks. Because we prioritized the critical services more, because those were scored harder. The game servers were only checked by just the orange-white team. But I think the red teamers were playing Minecraft with some of the other teams throughout the competition. So
There's some automation fails going on for the game servers. They had they automatically deploy PHP INI scripts to all the Apache servers, which makes sense. Disable system calls, so that way it stops reverse shell and stuff happening on web. However, the way that one of the game servers was set up is they had an Apache server that was running like proxied to internal connections, and there were 4 different games on the site, and each one was its own Docker container. But it was just like a website. Each Docker had like its own interface that like its own Apache that was running, and they accidentally deployed some wrong PHP on config where it like borked every single one of the Docker containers. So every time we brought it back up, the image from the disk was like wrong. So it took us like a few hours to fix the game server because we had to like figure out what the issue was and then go through each of the PHP INI files, like each image, and remove that line just so we could finally figure out how to bring the game server 2 back up or whatever.
Took you a few hours.
I'm kind of an idiot.
Take me.
Databases and web apps.
I already talked about that mostly.
Awesome.
There was one attack on there where they, I think it was like some sort of SQL injection thing where they just chucked corrupted data into our database, which caused it to go down. That was another like sort of quickie revert situation.
We didn't revert that one.
Did we not revert for that one?
We found a table and just cleared it.
Okay, yeah, we just cleared the table. Yeah.
So Firewall, we were given 2 polos, so that's cool. I like polos. So we were actually given a physical system, a physical polo for our on-site network. So that was really cool to actually be able to physically plug stuff in and then unplug cables and watch as people's internet died. Yeah, so by the end of the competition, I'd blocked over 1.6 million connections on our on-site firewall. So that was pretty cool. That's a lot of connections blocked. And a lot of those were DNS, HTTP, and DHCP because that's how Red Team was doing C2. I had a brief moment where I enabled DHCP so I could connect a new system and saw a few hundred requests. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, interesting methods of C2. And this screenshot at the bottom was pretty cool because that's one of the 2 moments during the competition where UCF was all red and we were all green. So that was pretty cool. That lasted for 2 checks total. Yeah.
And from talking with other teams, it sounded like UCF intentionally did that.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Well, not intentionally.
I thought that was them trying to get Red Team out of all their boxes.
Yes, so another portion of the competition is what we call business injects. So the way that the score is broken down, 40% of the points are going to service uptime, which is like the Linux and Windows systems being available online. Another 40% of the points is the business injects, and these are different tasks that you'll get taskings from the CEO. They'll write you a memo or letter saying, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z, and they'll carry it out. And then the final 20% of the points is customer, what we call white team, orange team points, where customers will call you on the phone or they'll notify you somehow saying, hey, I can't access the website, is it down? Or they'll have some kind of request. So the business injects, what I did for that is I had a binder and I printed out all my past injects from regionals, previous year's tryouts and things like that. Because 60% of the tasks that we got this year was actually reused from regionals or previous years. So I had all my reports written out, and like my 5 or 6 page report, I had it written out and I could just had to type it out exactly how I had it basically. Changed a few lines, modified it. So a lot of our injects that we had didn't actually take that much time because we had it pre-staged, ready to go. A couple things that we could have done better on, when we did get some white and orange team communications or taskings, they could have had more clear instructions. So we got someone on the phone that said, hey, one of your products isn't made out of, very eco-friendly material. What can you do about it? And we're the IT team, right? We don't have anything to do with what kind of materials our products are used with. So we had to contact the CEO, find out what they wanted us to do from there, different things like that. Some of the other business injects that we got were actually RE challenges, reverse engineering challenges that we had to solve. So they'd give us some kind of binary or some kind of file and we had to solve it and obtain the flag. We could have done better in more managing our time that way because we weren't able to get all of them solved in time because injects, they'll give you a certain amount of time to do them, whether it's 4 hours, 5 hours, maybe sometimes even an hour. So better managing our time. Another thing that, like I already mentioned, the orange team and white team, they'll come in and sometimes they'll ask you really ridiculous questions. One of the questions that we got was someone called me up and was like, hey, I know you guys sell game CDs. can your CDs be used to, you know, kill a zombie potentially and different things like that. So they'll give you really ridiculous scenarios and you have to do your best to answer them professionally and try not to laugh at the customer as well as you can. But that's basically what the inject side and the customer handling side is. The 40% of the points for the injects and then the 20% for the orange team, white team.
Yeah, so the white team, some of the tasks were like they would ask us to go see if our like web servers were up, if like you could browse to this one game on our e-com site. And then there was also, some of it was using the point of sale system that Tyler secured. And that was just basically making sure that any updates that white team pushed out to the database, they were reflected in Tyler's system. They would scan a barcode that the white team got, make sure everything looked right, and
So after the competition, the head of the red team came up and presented about red team stuff. These were two interesting slides from that presentation. Red team's initial time to compromise was 2 minutes, which is not the shortest it's ever been, but that's pretty short. Considering how some of us weren't logged in the first 2 minutes. Jake, I'm not naming any names. But the one interesting stat was that their time to plain text credentials was 40 minutes, which is way longer than we expected. So they had shells on some of the Windows boxes, but they didn't actually have the full plain text creds. Yeah, also red team somewhere gave us a list of a bunch of stuff to work on, which, you know, we'll hopefully work on that and integrate that. One other kind of interesting thing that they were talking about is that they're planning on moving to memory next year, is what they were saying. So having persistence not always be on disk. So that's gonna kind of suck because then we have to figure out how to get persistence out of memory and not just off the disk.
yeah. So I was in charge of logging again. Graylog worked pretty well once we got it up, but we ran into some issues setting it up. I had written out an instruction sheet basically telling me what commands to run and that stuff to get a fresh install of Graylog. But the proxy that the national team has set up didn't allow me to reach all of the websites and servers that I needed to, so that one kind of got kiboshed, which means I had to run off of the OVA files that they had on their patch server. And then we ran into an issue with that where it was like, it was thinking that it needed a license even though Graylog, the files that they had was supposed to be an open source version. So that was very interesting. So we had to do some digging and then somehow it eventually just worked. I don't know what changed. But yeah, once it was up, it was actually pretty good. Windows side, we used Sysmon and Swift on security, which is just a giant list of things that the cybersecurity community kind of came up with to say like, hey, if you see this, it's bad, so we're gonna write an alert for it. And that was like super helpful. We were able to see like, since we didn't really have any red team on Windows, I was able to see like when Austin would change passwords or something, or when a user logs on. Linux was okay. Setup is super easy. It's just adding like a single line to the rsyslog.conf file, but they weren't really descriptive at all. So I'm gonna look into finding something better for that, whether it's something like a sysmon that generates the logs, or if it's something else. We barely even got like where the traffic was coming from. And then yeah, since we ran into those issues with getting it set up, it was kind of mid of day 2 that it was set up, and at that point it wasn't crazy useful. But even when we had planned to set it up, was probably too late. I think running off of fresh files and knowing what to do even more, like practicing that, will help us get it up. I think 2 hours is a reasonable time frame. And then one thing that we're interested in looking into is seeing if we take someone like off of a Windows machine or something like that and just putting them directly onto incident response. That way, we have someone there. We can see when red team gets in and like actually write reports. Because if you turn in a response or an incident report saying like, hey, red team got in, this is how they got in, this is where they're coming from, this is what they did, you can actually get half of your red team points that you lost back. So yeah. for our organization, we didn't have any Google Drive. They couldn't really restrict it at regional since it was all virtual, so they kind of just let it go. But at nationals, they were able to proxy it off, so we had to bring in all of our password scripts and anything that way that we were bringing in externally, we had to have them printed off and use them that way. And then we just set up a share on one of the machines during the competition to pass around like screenshots for Injects and different files like that. We could throw files in for a backup and then someone else could grab them off. That way we had it in multiple places. I thought it worked really well.
They also had a chat server in the environment, some Discord, Slack-like thing.
Yeah, it was called Mattermost, but it's very similar to like Slack. Kind of Discord. Discord's a bit different. And then, yeah, one of the Linux people, I guess, wants to talk about
They
that
just put
last
the
one. I
ECSI
don't know.
on a big chunky laptop. That's where it lives.
Yay. Conclusion.
So you're probably asking what would have put us over the top to get first place? There are a few things that we kind of did miss up on. The biggest was probably our A6i going down. A majority of our SLA violations, which is like, if your services are down for like 6 checks in a row, you would get like minus 20 points, which you're also losing points for the services being down, which is 1 point per check, plus the 20 for like the SLA violation. So you're really losing 26 points each time a service is down for 6 checks. And at one point in time, I think we got like 3 or 4 SLAs from like 5 SLAs from like.
At the end, when Red Team messed with routes, we got about 7 SLAs from that whole instance. 5, 1 for each service, and then a few because we had another service that was down, but we didn't know it was down until after everything else came back up. And then earlier day 2, we had a similar thing happen where our ES6i went down, and we got an SLA on all the services again. So that's a good like 400 points probably. 200 to 300 points that was lost there, which.
Yeah, so those,
Yeah.
those points for the A6i are probably like avoidable that we could have done. So like the 200 or 300 is like, we went a lot closer to first, but other things that would have put us over were like, we had reverse engineering challenges, which like Annie said, we didn't dedicate enough time to. Like they said, most teams got like 2 to 3 of them each from each day. However, like the first day we only got 1 of them, and the second one we should have been able to get easily. That would have been another probably couple like 100 to 200 points total that we missed out on, maybe like per day. So
I think all of that combined, from our estimations on where UCF's point total was, would have pushed us over.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not realistic to expect all of that to be perfect. But there's a large buffer there that like if we were able to shrink it just a bit, we think we could really pose a threat to them.
yeah, if we noticed sooner that Windows, like the red team wasn't getting in, we probably should have pivoted off like full time, all 3 windows. People like Jackson should have been working on logging the entire time. Maybe Tyler should have been helping out, like the more focus on the injects. While I was looking at, I should spend more time on the reverse engineering challenges. I wasted a lot of my time like going over with a fine-tooth comb, looking for red team activity when I wasn't looking for anything because they weren't there.
Yeah, there was a lot of extra stuff that once, I don't think we ever fully realized red team wasn't on our boxes until like middle of day 2 when stuff should have been on fire and it wasn't. And even then we weren't positive. But if we're able to figure that out, that would give us a lot less time staring at a screen waiting for something to happen or like looking for something that's not there. That could be used, like Austin said, on different injects or flipping over to Linux or something like that. So that's also something that we should consider, but if red team did get in, that would also be kind of risky to just leave our boxes up in the air, so it's a trade-off.
Does anyone else think we missed anything that would have put us over the edge?
You already.
That could have killed the remaining shells.
Yeah, it's getting
Still got
UDP 443 outbound.
So there is some confusion on what exactly needs to be allowed that we never got clarified and probably should have. Depending on where you read in the official packet, it either says that there's a handful of services that need to be allowed outbound from every system, or they're only from client systems. And even when we've asked Dwayne previously, he won't give us a straight answer on that. So probably would have been good to go and confirm that, and that could have potentially saved some of those SLAs by killing some of Red Team's shells.
Because like I think Windows, it said you had to have remote desktop available at the start of the competition, which
Yeah, so I,
specifying the start seems weird if it's not something that you could take down later in the competition. So that was like one of the points of clarification that we needed to follow up on, and I'm sure there were Linux examples too.
Yeah, we lost a lot of green team points as well, which is probably like the third final thing that like we lost a ton of points on that would have put us over the edge. And green team points is possibly us on Windows disabling RDP like minute 0. Because like if they check for that kind of thing and it doesn't respond, then we might have been slowly leaking points that entire competition for it. But we aren't quite sure. Hopefully they'll tell us in a week when they like give us our rundown of what we did wrong and stuff.
Yeah, the hard stuff with all of that is there's no way really for them to let you know that it's not working. So if you're failing checks, there's like no indication of it, which is unfortunate, but something we have to keep in mind. I think this is the end of the slide deck. Yeah, overall CCDC is super fun.
Is this your first year?
Definitely would recommend everyone that's interested try out. It doesn't really matter what skill level you're at. If you try out and make it, you learn so much that it's easy to bring people up to speed for the most part. But yeah.
Most of us won't be coming back, so there'll be a lot of open spots on the team. So you have a pretty good shot.
Also pitch, like, a lot of these competitions are moving in person now, so it's like free vacation, if anything. So this one is in San Antonio. We stayed at a pretty nice resort. Had like a pool, lazy river, water slides, stuff like that.
Volleyball, ping pong outside,
Yeah, so
all the
it
amenities there.
was 80 degrees and very humid, felt like we were in the rainforest.
Wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Any questions?
Congratulations.
Another question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had any like the Linux firewall scripts on hand.
Oh, I got it.
Are they in the
Yeah,
repository?
in the DevSec repo.
So get out, I guess Shane will pull it up.
Basically, they're mostly written. We just like filled in the port numbers that we wanted to allow through or block within the script. We just tossed that file across all the systems via SSH magic and Shane's tool.
And competitions like this, it's all, you have to remember it's a game, like it's not like actual business, so there's a lot of cheese strats that going on. Like sometimes you just don't necessarily follow like what you do in real life, like for Windows, like disabling RDP and stuff that aren't supposed to be allowed. But also, we'd also like blow up the domain, so just in case like they'd compromise one box on the domain, it's pretty easy to like pivot through all of them. So what I did was I disconnected the scored services from the domain just in case Red Team was able to compromise any of them. Made it significantly harder for them to pivot into our scored services if they were able to hack anything anyway.
And this script actually renames IP tables to Yafa, just so they can't use it against us.
That way it makes it harder for them to.
It also
To
makes it
change
harder for our Docker containers to configure their own networking, so don't do that.
Could you
Yeah,
zoom
I mean,
in
the script-
like by a factor of 3?
Yeah, can you zoom in?
You wanna go click raw?
Yeah, Linux, they rename a bunch of binaries and stuff, I think. They like delete stuff that they don't want Red Team to have, just in case. Like typically you'd keep GCC on your system,
No GCC.
but not there. They don't want Red Team to be able to compile their own payloads.
I'll leave it right here, let me know if you want me to scroll down.
And this is all public too.
Yep, all this
So-
is at that DSU devsec /ace. //
It's all the same. Anyway, we
Yeah, Windows it doesn't matter.
we were banned from making edits to this, so I would have edited this, so don't take this as like the golden standard, it's
Yeah.
very questionable.
Yeah, they had a repo freeze like 3 months ago, so we weren't allowed to make any changes to it after regionals, which kind of sucked because we would have made a lot of improvements.
Yeah.
Which either would have made things a lot better or significantly worse.
But yeah. I'd say the biggest thing from this whole thing is firewalls are incredibly huge, at least on the Windows side.
Outbound firewalls, if Red Team can't get reverse shells, they can't do much, so.
Awesome, well, thank you guys for coming. If you have any questions,
Let's applaud the audience.
you know how to reach us.
No problem.